Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin daf Chet. Today's daf is sponsored by Gila Pollack in loving memory of her mother-in-law, Menorah Rotenberg, Menorah Batsari Gittel Yecheskel, who passed away suddenly last week. Menorah was in the first kindergarten class at Ramaz and was upset that the girls had to learn sewing instead of Gemara like the boys. She explained to Rabbi Lickstein he was given permission to learn Gemara with the boys. This was just the start of her fighting for equality for women in Jewish life and practice. She will be greatly missed by her children, grandchildren, and friends. Okay, with that, we're going to get started. I'll make two short announcements. If you don't have bookmarks yet for all of Seder and Dezikin, if you got it ready for Bava Kama or Bava Metzi or Bava Batra, then you have it ready for Sanhedrin. But if you didn't get it all and you're new to the learning, you can order bookmarks on our website. Also, Gefet went up yesterday about Pshara, the whole concept of compromise. Is compromise a good thing or a bad thing? And based on a machloket Rashi Tosfot. So I recommend you listen, especially it's a super interesting topic, and particularly in this Masechet where we're learning all about courts, to understand the different types of court systems and more in depth and what the perspectives were on them is very interesting. Okay, we're going to get started, and also just circle a friend's reminder if you haven't taken care of it yet, if you'd like to. Okay, what we're doing right now is we're in the middle of a series of drashot on the psukim. I made a study guide today. I could have started earlier, but I didn't. But the last few drashot, so I made a chart starting from today's daf, but kind of add to it in your head where we started yesterday from the section where we started with a long slew of drashot of the psukim in Sefer Devarim. So maybe I'll just start with reading the psukim in Devarim. We're in chapter 1 of Sefer Devarim. This is when Moshe starts to make a big speech to the Jewish people. And then he explains to them certain things that goes back, like a bit of a recounting of history from a unique perspective of certain things and how they were recounted as a whole. We're not going to get into that. But one of the main things is he talks about the Marechet HaMishpatit, what Moshe instituted of the whole system of courts. And interestingly enough, he doesn't mention Yitro at all, who was the one who mentioned the whole thing in the first place in Parsha Yitro and Sefer Shemot. Sefer Devarim, he doesn't mention it. And basically, he starts to say, I took, the heads of your tribes, smart, wise people, etc. Sarei Alafim, Sarei Meot, Sarei Chamishim, Sarei Asarot, right? Like, set up a whole system. Then in Tet Zayin it says, this is what we darshaned yesterday. And I commanded your judges to say, pay attention, because here it says, I commanded your judges. Now, soon we're going to say, I commanded you, which sounds like everybody, and we're going to get back to that later today. All those words we just darshaned yesterday. Then it says, Lo takiru b'mishpat. We ended with that. Specifically, that's what we said. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo tikirehu, and Rabbi Elazar said, Lo tinakrehu. Right? Lo tikirehu means don't recognize someone you know and love and rule in their favor because you like them. And lo tinakrehu, don't make them a nochri, a stranger, meaning don't take someone you don't like and say, I'm ruling against you because I don't like you. Kakaton kagadol tishmun, you will listen to small things and big things, or small things like big things. We're going to darshan that soon. Lo taguru mipnei ish, don't be fearful of anybody else. That we already darshaned. Ki mishpat le'elohim hu, because the judgment is really God. Okay, now what this means exactly, somehow God is part of the system here. God's presence is there. We talked about that before. Also, we're going to darshan this also today. Vadavar shemikem takrivun alay ushmatif. I'm just setting up the groundwork for the beginning part of today's shiur. Anything that you have difficulty with, bring to me and I will hear it. Okay, and then in that moment I commanded all of you, meaning all the people, even though Moshe started off with just the judges I was commanding, but now I commanded all of you that you should do these things. Okay, so we're going to get back and darshan all those parts. Now, we're going to start with this whole idea of Takirei Mishpan, and for that we're going to have a story. And Terry mentioned in class the other day when I asked after class what happens in American law. If a judge doesn't want to take a case, can they just choose, I don't want to take a case, or they have no choice? So Terry said, right, our in-house lawyer, even though we have a bunch of them, but Terry said that the only time you can't take a case really is if you have that's what we say, nogea b'davar. You have a connection, a personal connection to someone. So that's what we're going to see from this story. Ush bezin cheder Rav, there was someone who hosted Rav at some point. Atel kameladina comes before Rav for a case. Amar le. So first he just comes to Rav. Rav doesn't know why he's there. There's a few different ways of reading this next line. I'm just going to go with one interpretation. If yours says the opposite, that it wasn't, it's who's Amar Le, who says to who what is a little confusing here, because if you go one way, then you're missing some words because it's going to be like a double Amar Le, the same person speaking. I'm not going with Rashi interpretation. I'm going with a different interpretation because it seems more logical to me from the grammar. Amar Le, lavush bichne ana. So Rav says to him, aren't you the guy who hosted me once before? According to Rashi, the guy says, don't you know me? I'm the one who hosted you. Okay, so we'll get back to that, but we'll leave Rashi aside. Amar le'in. So the guy says, oh yeah, I'm the one who hosted you. Excuse me 1 minute. Amar le, so then my version is missing some words. It just works better with the word ushbezichne in the usual translation of it. Because if you say it one way, it would have to be host. If you say it the other way, it would have to be guest. So it really means host. So therefore, Rav says, weren't you my host? The guy says, yes. Now we add some words, which come up in a different text, a different version of the Gemara. Rav says, what are you doing here? What do you want from me? He says, I have a court case. I'm having a fight with someone and I came for you to judge me. Amar le, psil nalach ledina. Well, I can't judge you because you did something nice for me once, and I'm concerned that I might be biased toward you because of that, because you hosted me. Amar le Rav Kana. Now, Rav didn't leave him high and dry and say, well, go find a new judge. She said to Rav Kana, Puk daine, you judge Rav. Now, Rav Kahana saw that this guy was being arrogant. Probably the guy thought, well, if Rav chose me a different Dayan, well, that Dayan will help me out, and he was hoping that Rav Kahana would just rule in his favor, just because, if this guy was nice to Rav and Rav chose Rav Kahana, then maybe Rav Kahana will be partial to him, and that's what he was looking for. So he was kind of arrogant about the whole thing, and Rav Kahana didn't like that. Amarla, arrogant in the sense like, oh, I know Rav and I hosted Rav and, kept dropping things, maybe something along those lines. Amarle, itzaita, tzaita. Said to him, listen, I'm going to rule you how I'm going to rule you. And you're going to listen. And if I say this, you're going to listen to me. Vilo. And if you don't listen to me, because you think you're better than me, or, you've got Rav on your side, mapichna la Rav me'udnach. I'm going to take Rav out of your ears. In other words, I'm going to disconnect between you and Rav totally, and you're going to have nothing to do with him. And, basically saying, I'm not partial at all to you, and, stay out of my way and let me rule. Okay. Off of the story, back to the pasuk. Kakaton kagadol tishmon, right? We're up to that part in the pasuk. You will hear small things like big things. So I'm a Rish Lakish. Okay, each time we're going to have a different rabbi darshaning each pasuk. Rish Lakish says, She'eh chaviv alecha din shel pruta kedin shel me'amana. You should love a case like that's dealing with one small coin. There's an argument over one coin, to a din of me'amana, to 100 zuzim, okay, which is a lot more. It's not just 100 times prutot. There were lots of prutot in a zuz, right? I think like 96 or something. So this is 100 zuzim. So basically what it's saying is, treat each case as it's important, as if it's as important as something with, $1 million case. Lemay hilchata. So the Gemara says, okay, I don't get this. What are you saying, Rish Lakish? If it's saying a case comes to you of a pruta, look into it, figure out what's right, what's wrong, make your ruling. Okay, pshita. Everybody knows that. What? You're going to say, I'm not going to look into that case because it's a pruta? Ela la gdume. What he means is, don't say, okay, here are the cases I have before me. The guys with the pruta came first, but I'm going to put them at the end of the list because it's just not an important case. I'm going to deal with the $1 million case first, and I'm going to deal with the pruta case last. That you can't do. That's what it means, kakaton kagadol. You have to treat them the same, not just in terms of ruling. Obviously, you're going to have to take it seriously when you rule, but also in terms of the order in which you see the cases. Lo tagur mipnei ish. Some people take out this whole line because we already saw this, but some people have it in. Obviously, it's here because it's the next words in the pasuk. But obviously, we understand why it shouldn't be here because we already learned it. So lo tagur mipnei ish, we bring one of the interpretations here. Amar Rabbi Chanan, al technis devarecha mipnei ish. Don't hold in words because you're scared of what the person's going to say, right? You're scared of the people, the litigants. Ki mishpat lelohim hu. Okay, so now what does it mean that the mishpat is to God, right? It's not God ruling, it's humans ruling. Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina explains like this. What God is saying in this pasuk is, Lo dayan le'rishaim she'notim mizeh mamon v'notim lezeh shelo kedin. It's bad enough that, or is it not, right? It's already bad that if you have a bad judge who basically rules in favor of one over the other incorrectly, and on purpose, and now basically causing money to be in the wrong place, right? In the wrong person's hands. Ella, now if when that happens, what does God do? Well, God has to personally intervene. What does God have to do? Let's say you lost money in a case and it was wrong that the judge took the money from you. So Ella shematrichim oti lachzir mamon lebalav. It's not it. Right? Besides, it's so terrible that that judge caused you to pay money that you shouldn't have had to pay. But now God has to get personally involved and create some scenario where you get your money back. Okay, this means like God's gonna, arrange something that, let's say you find money on the street that you don't have to return, and you'll get the value back of what the judge made you pay for no reason. So what it's saying is if somebody is a judge, the judge judges incorrectly, God has to get personally involved. And that's what we care. God ensures that justice is served. So justice is served in this way by getting the money back to the person who lost it unfairly. But now we have a problem with this pasuk, because not a problem in the sense of there's something wrong in the pasuk, a problem with the fact that Moshe said this. Anything difficult that you have, bring to me, and I will hear it. So, I'm a Rabbi Chanina, a Rabbi Yoshia, either Rabbi Chanina or Rabbi Yoshia says, Al davar zeh ne'en nash Moshe. Moshe was punished for this, because that was arrogant. Moshe came and said, anything that you have difficulty with, I can answer everything. Well, Moshe can answer everything, first of all. We know there were a bunch of cases in the Torah where Moshe didn't know what to do. One of them being the one we're going to mention right now, the daughters of Tzlafchad. They wanted to inherit. There were no brothers, right? Anyone who learned Bava Batra, we spent a long time on that. And now we're going to say that was a punishment to Moshe. Shene'emal, a punishment for his arrogance in saying, oh, I can answer everything. Well, he couldn't, right? And it was to put him in his place. Shene'emal, vayikrev Moshe mishpatan lifnei Hashem. He had to bring it to God. Moshe didn't know everything. But the problem is that that's not exactly what the pasuk said, that Moshe said, I know everything, because Rav Nachman says, Miktiv va'ashmiachem, ushmativ ktiv. Okay, let's start with what it says. Ushmativ means, and I will hear it. If it had said, Ashmiachem, I will make it be heard to you, meaning I will tell you what the ruling is, then I could see it would be arrogant. That's not what the pasuk says. The pasuk says, anything that is too difficult for the other judges, bring it to me. Bring it to me, meaning, okay, bring it to me. If I know the halacha, then I'll tell you it. Ilo, azilna v'gemirna. And if not, I'll go and I'll try to learn it. So it wasn't so arrogant of Moshe to say that. So basically, we don't really have anything to darshan on that part of the pasuk, but the Gemara doesn't want to leave it, because the Gemara is still troubled by one thing. Why did Moshe know about Benot Tzlafchad? Why did he have to go to God? So what do they answer? What do they say? Ela kedetanya. To explain that, we have a braita. And this we learned when we learned this section. Really, Moshe Rabbeinu should have known it. They were tzadikot, they were righteous women. And because of that, they got rewarded, that they were given the credit for bringing it up, and Moshe didn't know, and he had to go to God. Otherwise, Moshe could have just written the law, as all the other laws are written in the Torah. But we wanted to, and we'll see in a minute why we wanted to do that, but we wanted to give them credit so they get credit in the Torah. And likewise, but on the other side of that same coin, there was another case. There were a few cases, but they're pointing out two of them where Moshe didn't know the halacha. There's the Mikoshesh Etzim, the person who was chopping trees on Shabbat in the desert, who gets punished, but they don't know what to do with him. And then they find out, okay, Moshe goes to God and he gets the answer, what he's supposed to do. So you should have had the Parsha Mikoshesh Moshe Rabbeinu. It just should have been written in. But because he did something terrible, he gets, so to speak, credit, negative credit, okay? And it was written because of him. What is this all coming to teach you? We bring on bad, things that are bad by people who do bad things. And we bring about good things by people who do good things. In other words, good causes more good, bad causes more bad, right? This could mean a lot of different things, but this is an indication of it, and that's why Benot Tzlafchad got credit for theirs, and the Mikoshesh got credit for his. Back to our topic. Ktiv va'atzaveh et shoftechem ba'et hahi Uchtiv atzaveh etchem ba'et hahi. So I pointed this out when I read the psukim. First it says, I commanded your judges. Then it says, I commanded you. So who is it? The judges or you? Who is this whole responsibility of the court system on? Is it the responsibility of the people? Is it the responsibility of the judges? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Simlai. Azhara letzibur shetehei imat dayan alehen. V'azhara ledayan sheyisbol et hatzibur. There's two commandments here. One is, right, it takes two to tango. In order to have a court system, you have to have number one, you have to have the people respect the court system. And the people have to say that they have to accept the jurisdiction of the court, right? Because what's the value of a court if nobody accepts what the court says? So they have to be willing to accept what the court says and be fearful of the judge. And the judge has to be sovel tatzibur. It's not so easy to do that, right? There's a lot of people who come in and are difficult and make their lives miserable, and it's not so easy, or have silly complaints, or whatever it might be. The dayan has to handle that. Okay, they have to be willing to handle whatever comes their way. Ad kama, to what extent do they have to be able to handle this? And it's an interesting pasuk they quote. Amar Rabbi Chanan v'itema Rabbi Shabtai asher yisah ha'omenet hayonek. Like the person taking care of a young child takes care of that young child. Like the young child could cry and, like you say, act like a baby, really is a baby, right? Needs a lot of attention. That's the kind of attention that, and that's the kind of behavior that even if they're behaving like babies, like children, right? You still have to, the judge has to be willing to accept them and treat them properly. Why is this an interesting pasuk to quote? What's the context? Actually, a very negative context. It's when the people come and complain in the desert in the beginning there, when this complaints start in chapter 11. So Moshe says, he has this pasuk where he says, Ha'anochi hariti et ha'am hazeh, did I birth this nation? Im anochi laditi, right? Did I give birth to them? Ki tomari lai se'eu b'chakecha ka'asher yisah ha'omenet hayonek. Basically, Moshe is saying, why do I have to bear the terrible burden of these people and deal with them like as if they're babies? And even though it's like Moshe's complained about this, right? In the end, we all know that Moshe does need to. And basically that's what they're saying here. So it's not a positive pasuk, even though if you quote it out of context, it sounds like it could be positive. Oh, just like the way someone takes care of a baby in a positive way, but it was really said as a complaint. Okay, next psukim. Now we're done with those psukim. And we're now skipping to a different pasuk, which just has to do with leadership and judging, not necessarily judging particularly. It's really about Yoshua, when he became the leader of the Jewish people at the end of Sefer Devarim. Ktiv ki ata tavo, uchtiv ki ata tavi. Okay, there's one pasuk we're talking now in Devarim chapter 31, verse 7, and then we're going to see verse 23. In verse 7, it says that Moshe calls to Yoshua and he says to him, in front of all the Jewish people, Chazak v'amatz, be strong. Ki ata tavo et ha'am hazeh el ha'aretz asher nishba Hashem lavotechem. You're going to go et ha'am hazeh. It sounds like you're going to go with the nation together, and you're going to conquer, to the land that God promised. Then in verse 23, which is not clear who's speaking, it says Vayitzav Yoshua bin Nun. Then he commanded Yoshua, which could be Moshe, could be Hashem. Vayomer chazak ve'amat, same thing. Ki, right, be strong. Ki ata tavi et bnei Israel. You will bring. It sounds here like single-handedly bring. Not you will go with the nation and conquer. You will bring them in. Okay, et bnei Israel. And now at the end of the pasuk it says, El ha'aretz asher nishbati lahem. In the first pasuk it said to the land that God promised. Here it says to the land that I promised, which sounds like God is the one speaking. So what's bothering them right now is ki ata tavo and ki ata tavi. And ata tavo sounds like you're going to go with the people, meaning what they're going to assume this means is you're going to go with other leaders and lead the people. And ata tavi sounds like you're going to do it single-handedly. You're going to rule the people. So how do we resolve this? I'm Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan is going to basically say one is Moshe talking and one is God talking. And basically God doesn't agree with Moshe's approach. So Amar lo Moshe li Yoshua, atavas kenim shabadori mahem. Right? Moshe said to Yoshua, you're going to go with the elders of your generation. And then Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu, tol makel v'hachal kol kedam. Take us a stick or a rod and smack them in the heads, meaning you have to rule with an iron fist. Dabar achad lidor ve'en shnei dabarim lidor. There's one ruler. A dabar is a ruler. There's one ruler per nation, or per generation. There aren't two rulers. You can't have this let's all rule together. Nobody knows who to listen to. You have differences of opinion. It gets very complicated. One leader, and that's it. Okay, so here you have God kind of disagreeing with Moshe about how leadership is supposed to be. That's the end of the first section of today, which was all different drashot about judges, about leaders, about the people, about how the people are supposed to accept them upon themselves, and from those verses in Devarim, particularly from the beginning, other than the last one, which was from the end. Tana, now we're going to go to another braita. Now we're back to our Mishna, really, although we're not back to our Mishna because we're going to quote an external braita, right? Something that wasn't in the Mishna, but it's parallel to the Mishna. We're talking about what things have to go before three judges. We're still in that. Zimun b'shlosha. Zimun we do with three. This doesn't sound like judges. It sounds like zimun. Zimun's Birkat Hamazon. If you have three people, you do a zimun, right? You say a special introduction to benching. My zimun, Ilaim Birkat zimun, if you're going to say, right, and obviously that has nothing to do with this, right? Because that's not judges, it's not our topic. So they say, Ilaim, if you're going to say it's Birkat zimun, well, it can't be. Not because it has nothing to do with our topic, but because Vahatanya, it says in a braita, zimun or Birkat zimun b'shlosha. It says in a different braita, there's zimun and Birkat zimun, and both are done with three, which sounds like they're two different things. One is zimun and one is Birkat zimun. So zimun must be something else. And v'chitem, if you want to say, no, that's not true, perusha kamefarish, maybe when it says zimun or Birkat zimun b'shlosha, what it means is zimun, which is Birkat zimun, and it's just translating, right? My zimun, Birkat zimun, and then really it's all talking about zimun. Well, we'll pull out another braita. Bahatanya, there's a third braita that says, because we have one that says zimun b'shlosha. Then we had zimun uberkat zimun b'shlosha, but maybe you could say that what it means is zimun colon. What does that mean? Birkat zimun. Okay, but there's a third braita that says zimun b'shlosha, birkat zimun b'shlosha. Now here it says this is done with three and this is done with three. Well, that makes it very clear that these are two totally different things. So otherwise, you wouldn't say with three and with three twice. So can't say that. Elamai zimun. So what is zimun then? Then what is zimun? Azmune ledin. It's a subpoena. When they subpoena you to court, kihada amarava, like Rava said, hani beitzlata dayane diatve. If three judges sit, ve'azil shlicha de beidina, and then they send out a messenger from the court to subpoena somebody to court, ve'amar mipume dechad, and the person comes and says, listen, one of them wanted you to come, la markum. You don't have to listen. If you get a subpoena that says one person summoned you to court, you don't have to go. You only have to you only have to listen to a summons to court if it says there the three people invited you to come, subpoenaed you to come. Ada amar mishmei dekulu. Okay, it has to be said in the name of all three judges, and that's what it means zimun b'shlosha. The decision and the writing down of it of the subpoena has to be done by three judges. Now, and the main thing here is it also has to be written by three judges. So when you see a subpoena that only one judge invited you, you don't have to go. Hanimile, however they say, we're going to limit this a little bit. Hanimile below Yoma Dedina. That's only if you were subpoenaed on a day that the courts don't sit. So if you get a subpoena on a day that's not Monday or Thursday, and it says that one of the judges invited you, you don't have to show up. But if it says one of the judges invited you on a day that the court sat, well, you know that one of those judges sat with two others, and there's no way they would have invited you if they hadn't all agreed, and therefore you can assume it was done with three. So even though we say you have to do zimun b'shlosha, and you don't have to listen to a subpoena if it doesn't have all three, it depends on what day of the week you get your subpoena. Okay, moving to the next section of the Mishnah, tashlumei kefil. This is the double payment, which we said was a knas, a penalty. So remember, we talked about smicha. Smicha is when someone gets smicha la Rabbanut, right? They have the authority to rule. And we learned that smicha is the authority also. What it gives you authority to do is knas. Okay, and you can't do knasot if you don't have smicha. So just keep that in mind here. Shalach le Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda le Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. So Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda sends a question to Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, two different Rav Nachmans. Yilamdenu Rabbeinu, please teach us. Dine knasot bekama. In front of how many people do you have to do ruled in dine knasot cases? Okay, now if I asked you this question, you could answer very easily because we learned it in the Mishnah. We said Tashlumei Kefil, Arava Chamisha, right? We had a list of a bunch of knasot, and they're all b'shlosha. So my Kamibaile, what was he asking? Hanan Tnan, we already learned b'shlosha. Ella, what he was asking was Yachid Mumche Kamibaile. Da'in dine knasot olo. We learned about gzelo v'chavalot b'shlosha, but we also learned that instead of 3 regular judges, you could have a yachid mumche, you could have a specialist, and one only you could have. If someone really is like a Rav Nachman we saw, right, or someone like that, Rabbi Chia, then they can judge a case alone. So can they also judge dine knasot by themselves? So when it says shlosha, does it mean shlosha yotot, but a yachid mumche could also? So Amar Le, to which Rav Nachman bar Yaakov answers Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda and says, Tani Chua. Let's learn it from our Mishnah. It says, Tashlumi kefel v'tashlumi arba'a v'chamisha b'shlosha. My shlosha, what does shlosha mean? Now, if you want to say ilema, shlosha hidyotot. Now, I already told you can't do this, remember? Because you need to have smicha to do it, to be even on a court of 3. So 3 hidyotot can't judge dinei knaso, because only if you were appointed to be a specialist who can do this kind of thing. So if you're going to say shlosha hidyotot, and he doesn't quote what I said, but he says, ha'amar avu adavuch, didn't your father of your father, meaning your grandfather, Mishmei de Rav, say in the name of Rav, afilu asara vehein hedyotot. You could even have 10 judges. But if they're regular people, they don't have smicha, they're not specialists, psulim the dinei knasot. Okay, they cannot do dinei knasot. Ela mumchim v'kamar shlosha. So it must be the Mishnah is talking about mumchim. And what does the Mishnah say? Shlosha. So from there you learn, shlosha mumchim can do dinei knasot, but shlosha hedyotot can't, and a yachid mumche can't, which was really what our question was. Okay, I'm going to summarize our daf until this point, because now we're going to start on something entirely new and get into a whole thing, which is going to continue into tomorrow. So quick summary until this point, and that will be our summary for now. Different drashot on the psukim about Moshe's appointment of judges. Then zimun b'shlosha, which we learned was a subpoena. And we limited it a little bit, though. We said in the end, you don't really need shlosha if it happened on the day of the court. And tashlume kefel, which is dinei knasot. And we basically answered this question that dinei knasot cannot be done by hedyotot. And really, the main question was, can it be done by yachid mumche? And the answer is no. Now we're going to get to the motzi shema. If you remember in the Mishna, there was a machloket about a motzi shema. Let's talk about a motzi shema. It's a man who claims his wife was not a virgin, even though she claims she was before the marriage, which has 2 ramifications. Number 1, he gave her a ketubah for a virgin ketubah, which means he promised her a lot more money, right? You get double the amount of money if she had never slept with anyone before. And furthermore, if he can prove that she's not a virgin because she had relations with someone once they were betrothed, then she gets the death penalty. She gets stoned, because that's a nara murasa, a woman when she's betrothed and sleeps with another man. She's already, even though she's not married yet, she's considered an ish ish. This is from a betrothal. This is not, like, Erusin is not engagement the way we use the term nowadays. When we get engaged, there's no halachic ramifications to it. It's when we do kiddushin under the chuppah, before we do the shava bracha, we have a bracha of kiddushin. That's the Erusin. In those days, they used to do it like a year before. Nowadays, we do it all at the same time. So if we have this betrothed woman, she's after kiddushin, before nisuin, and she sleeps with another man, she's going to get the death penalty. Now, if the man comes to court claiming, okay, and usually the idea is he brings, according to the Torah, he brings the sheet and there's no blood on it, shows she wasn't a virgin. Again, it's a complicated topic. Women could have lost her virginity some other way, but he claims that she's a virgin. He's actually believed for the financial piece on his own, even without witnesses, unless the family can prove he's lying. But so there's a lot of ways this case could go. Number 1, and this is important to understanding what we're going to see going forward. So number 1, he could be coming without witnesses. Okay, maybe we should even go the extreme case. If he brings witnesses, we'll start right there. If he brings witnesses that saw that she slept with another man while they were betrothed, that's his biggest amount of proof, or strongest proof, and she gets killed. That will be dinei nefashot. If he comes for money, like saying, the ketubah money is wrong because I did it as if she was a virgin, she's not a virgin, then it's a monetary case. Okay? That's the in-between where he doesn't have witnesses, but it does have his word. And then we have, if he was lying, which there's different ways that you could prove he was lying, and it's unclear exactly how you could prove it. Today we'll see one case where you could see this. Then the father of the girl can claim this guy was the Motzi Shema is really called the defamer. He defamed her for no reason, made her look bad. He was lying, and he has to pay a penalty, a knas. and that would be regular dinei knasot, which you do b'shlosha. So it's either b'shlosha because it's dinei knasot, it's shlosha because we're dealing with dinei mamonot, which is the husband's claiming mamonot from the ketubah, or it's a dinei nefasho because she slept with someone and that's when there's witnesses. But the Mishnah says it's basically machloket, whether we do a motzi shemra in front of 3 or in front of 23. And it doesn't seem to distinguish between which case we're talking about. And it's unclear what their machloket is. And for that, we're going to start today with 4 different interpretations of what their machloket is. And tomorrow we're going to get to even more. Okay, it's quite unclear what their debate is. So the Gemara questions and says, so we have Rabbi Meir who says 3, and we have the rabbis who say 23 because the rabbis say it could become a dinei nefasho case because theoretically a motzi shemra could be killed if she is proven to have been zinta, right, where she sleeps with someone while they're betrothed. So the Gemara says, "V'chi yesh bo dinei nefasho, my have." Well, if right, so now they say, right now it's not dinei nefasho. So why are we going to turn it into dinei nefasho? Maybe it'll be dinei nefasho if right now there's no witnesses. And we know either the husband's coming with witnesses or he's not coming with the witnesses. If he's not coming with the witnesses, it's dinei mamonot. So why are we all of a sudden shifting it to dinei nefasho and saying it could turn into dinei nefasho? He doesn't have witnesses. So Amar Ula, so the first explanation is Ula. He says, B'chosheshin lelaz kam b'flagei. It's a machloket about, are we worried about rumors spreading? Now, rumors spreading, laz usually means something else, but we're going to explain it like this. Rabbi Meir savar ein chosheshin lelaz, Rabbanan savar chosheshin lelaz. This guy comes to court without witnesses. All he wants to say is, my wife wasn't a virgin. Here's the proof from the sheet. And basically, I don't want to pay her all that. I don't want to commit to her all that ketubah money because she wasn't a virgin. Well, if this happens, the question is, are we concerned that now word's going to get around about this woman? And if word gets around, perhaps someone will remember, oh, I saw this woman sleeping with a man, on this and this date. And maybe the fact that we do it in court creates publicity. That's the laws, right? Are we concerned that the rumors will be, word will get around about this case and maybe witnesses will come forward? The husband wasn't able to find witnesses, but maybe, now Rabbi Meir says we're not worried about that. If there were witnesses, the husband would have found them. And Chachamim say no. Maybe someone will come out of the woodwork, hear the case, and say, oh, I know about this woman. I saw her. So if you're worried about laws, then you have to go to a beit din of 23 from the beginning, because it might turn into a case of 23. If you're not worried about that, you think the chances are so slim, then you could just judge it in a case of with 3 judges. That's Ula. Rava Amar Kule Amal Laz Lo Cheshina. Rava says nobody's worried about that. That's not the issue here. Now, starting with Rava and through Abai and Rav Papu, we're going to see today, they all limit the case a little bit. They say not all motzi shemras are going to be in 23, okay, which is what it sounded like from the beginning. Ula is going to say every case because every case could potentially turn into a dinei nefasho case. But Rava says no, it's going to have to be in a particular case. What's this? And I didn't explain yet what it means. We're chosheshin l'kvodan shel rishonim, but I'll explain in a minute. Let's say the case was, and this is what he's going to say the debate is. They first got together, the husband said, I have witnesses, and they got together 23 judges to judge a dinei nefasho case. Then what happened? V'ibadu. Well, ibadu means they scattered, meaning he got together these 23 judges, but then turns out didn't have witnesses. Maybe the witnesses wouldn't come. We don't know. For whatever reason, said he had witnesses. We thought it was dinei nefasho. We brought 23 together. Now he doesn't have witnesses. It's just his word. Now his word alone, well, it could be a dinei mamonot case. But we started already with 23. So and then the court starts to separate. V'amar lahu daimi limia dinei mamonot. He says, wait, don't leave. At least it's a dinei mamonot case with the issue of the ketubah. So turning out I'm a bet. So wait, let's just go back and explain. So now let's go back. So now the question is, are we chosheshin for the kvodan shel rishonim? Since the case started in front of 23, is it appropriate now to downgrade to 3 or downsize to 3? So Rabbi Meir says, no, it's not a problem. It's now a different case. It was dinei nefashot, it's dinei mamonot. We switch. According to The Chachamim, no. Chachamim say 23. Why do they say 23? Once you started with 23, you can't downsize to 3. That's not respectful to the original Dayanim. So you have to go back to the court of 23. Now the Gemara, before we get to the other two interpretations, is going to bring a meitive. Meitive is a difficulty on an emora, and it's going to be a question on ula. So we started with ula choshishin lalaz. We went to Rava. Okay, if you remember, the main thing to understand right now is that Rava doesn't think every case is going to be in front of 23. But Ula thinks every case, because any case is a potential to turn into a dina nefashos case, because maybe Eidim will come out of the woodworks. So now we have a problem, because the Tosefta has a bit of a different version. The Tosefta says, "V'chachamim omrim, tiva'o mamon b'shlosha, tiva'o nefashot esrim b'shlosha." If the husband came for a monetary issue like the ketubah, then it'll be in front of 3. If the husband came for nefashot, to kill her for znut, then it will be 23. So bishlam ala Rava, to Rava it makes sense. Because tiva'o mamon tchila b'shlosha. If you started with mamon, then you're going to stay with 3. Because there's no issue of choshishan l'chvodan shel rishonim, right? Because you were never in front of 23 to begin with. But tiva'o nefashot tchila, if you first came with nefashot and then didn't have witnesses, is exactly what Rava said. It fits perfectly. Then afilu mamon, even if it turns into a mamonot case in the end, because the husband doesn't have witnesses, be'esrim b'shlosha. So to Rava, we could have a case of Motzi Shemra where it's 3. We could have a case where it's 23, and that makes perfect sense. Ela le'ula kasha, but to Ula, any case of mamon could also turn into nefashot, and that's what the rabbis say should always be done from the beginning in 23. So how could the rabbis have said in the Tosefta, tiva'o mamon b'shlosha, that if it was just a monetary case, you could do it in front of 3? According to Ula, that wouldn't work. Now, even though Rava is the one whose opinion works very nicely, and Ula is the one who doesn't, Rava actually finds an answer for Ula. I'm a Rava, and he gives a little intro. Ani va'arisha b'chaburat targimna. This comes up a lot. Me and the lion in the group figured this out. Okay, meaning me and a very strong one of our group. Umanu, who is that? So Gemara kind of in parentheses, who is this Arisha b'chaburat? Rav Chia bar Avin. We explain the following. How can we explain this Tosefta? It's talking about a unique case. Shevi, and if you remember, I said there's 3 possible cases. There's dine nefashot, right, which is the husband's claim. There's that she was zinta while they were betrothed already. There's the dine mamonot, which is he doesn't have really witnesses, but he can claim money. And then there's the father can claim monetary case, right, where the father can claim you defamed my daughter and you have to pay a penalty. So it's going to move over to there, and that's what we're going to say in the end. Tiva'o mamon is when the case gets flipped, and the litigant who's the one who's started off as the defendant now becomes the one prosecuting, right? The one on the other side. So, so the husband says, I have witnesses that she was zinta, that she had relations with somebody else while we were betrothed. Brings those witnesses to court, they testify. So that's a classic dina nefashot case. And that would be obviously in front of 23. Vehevi ha'avedim, but then the father brings 2 witnesses, v'hizimun le'de'abal, and they turn those witnesses into edim zomimim. They say, you testified that she had relations with this man on this and this day and this time and this place. But we were with you at that time somewhere else, and you couldn't possibly have seen that going on, and they become false witnesses. Now, what did we say? The husband at least is believed for the monetary claim, but not in this case. If the husband is accused of bringing false witnesses, then that ruins his credibility rating, and we basically don't believe him for anything. And now we're going to flip the case, and the father's going to come claim a monetary, that balig vote mamon mi bal b'shlosha. So what's this split of the rabbis, 3 and 23? If the husband comes, we're going to say 23 always, because maybe it'll be, even if it turns into mamonot, it doesn't matter. Maybe, right? Or even if he comes from the start from mamonot, it might turn into 23 because witnesses will come out of the woodwork. However, if we started with 23 for the husband, but then his witnesses were deemed false witnesses, and now it's going to be a counterclaim, and the father is going to say, you defamed my daughter and claim money, that's a whole new case. And that could be ruled in front of 3 because that's never going to get to a case of an issue of dine nefashot. Okay, nobody gets killed in that case. And that's what the rabbis mean. They're talking about 2 totally different cases. And that's the way to resolve that braita according to Ula's reading. Now we're going to move on to the next two interpretations of the machloket. Forgetting about the Tosefta, putting that aside right now. Abayamal. So you're asking Gita about the Edim Zomim and what happens to them. So that really depends. If there was already Gemardin, then the Edim will get killed. Okay, because if Nigmar Adin, then the Edim Zomim get what they tried to do. If it wasn't Nigmar Adin, they don't actually get killed. So that's a side question. But that's not what we're talking about here at all. Abayamar, Dekule Alma, Chosheshin Lelazu, Mishum Fodan Rishonim. This is a bit of a strange line, but he's basically saying either really everybody agrees that we are concerned, like Ula said, and everyone agrees we're concerned for what Rava says, or just that's not an issue. Some people say this just means forget about those issues. Okay, however we read that line, it's not so critical. But here comes his issue. Now, before we get to him in the next opinion, the next two opinions have to do with warnings. Hatra. Hatra is a big topic we're going to talk about a lot in this Masechet, because this Masechet talks about also the punishments. And to get punished by the court, you have to have been warned. Okay? Otherwise, maybe we'll see this in the last line of today's Gemara, which is maybe you didn't know and it was shkaga. Maybe it was unwitting. Maybe you didn't mean to do the action. Maybe you didn't realize it was forbidden. So we can't punish you unless you had awareness of it. So how do we know you have awareness? We warn you. And you have to accept the warning and say, I know, and I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. So you're about to murder someone, and you say, I don't, like someone says, if you murder them, you're going to get killed by the court. And you say, yeah, I know, and I don't care. And then you murder, then we can actually give you capital punishment. If we didn't say that, then we can't. So what about this Motzi Shemra case? We're talking about this is a Dina Nefasho case because the woman, right, could possibly, and let's say Choshishin Lalaz, let's say he doesn't even have witnesses, but we have to be concerned that maybe it'll turn into a case where there'll be witnesses. But what's the issue? So why is there a machloket then 23.3? It should be obvious 23, especially if we say, everyone's Choshishin Lalaz, it could turn into Dina Nefashot. Well, maybe we have a case that can never become Dina Nefashot because there's a problem with the warning. What was the problem? And then we have to find a case where there's a machloket about it. It's a clear-cut problem, then everyone will agree we do it in front of 3. So we need some in-between case. Ta'atru bastam. They warned her and they said, if you sleep with this man right now, you're betrothed to someone and you'll get the death penalty. But they didn't tell her which death penalty she's going to get. And that's a subject of debate. V'hai tanahu, and you can see this machloket, the machloket here in this braita, the same machloket between now. We're going to attribute it to Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. Ditanya, ush'ar kol chayvei mitot shebetorah, ein memitin otan ela be'edah, ve'edim v'hatra'ah, v'ad shudiu shu chayav mitah be'beitim. According to Tanakama, this is going to match the rabbi's opinion that any chayvei mitot in the Torah, you can't kill them unless you have edah, which is the 23. Remember, edah matzelet, edah shofetet, that was 20, and then we got to 23. Ve'edim, witnesses that saw the action, and warning. And they have to say that you're obligated death by the court. As long as they say death, they don't have to say what kind of death, and that matches the rabbis. So therefore, if she was warned that she was going to get killed, then we can kill her. And therefore, 23. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ad shiudiu be'ezeh mitah ne'erag. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not enough to say death penalty. You have to say which death penalty. There's 4 ways of killing people. Skilas reifeh hereg chenek. We'll get to all that later in our Masechet. So if she wasn't warned what death penalty, then you can't kill her. If you can't kill her, well, we'll never get to Dinei Nefashot, and we'll do it in front of 3. And that's Rabbi Meir. Rav Papa Amar, here's a takeoff on this. 4th explanation. Hacha bi'isha chavera askinan. Well, we're talking about a woman who's part of the group of people called chaverim, as opposed to amei aretz. They're people who know the law. Now, what's the purpose of hatra'ah? Well, kamiflage beplukta to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbanit, Ditanya. Now, we're not going to bring the rabbi's position, but this is a subject of debate. How do chaverim need warning or not? So the rabbis who aren't quoted here think chaverim don't need to be warned. Okay, why? I'm sorry, chaverim need to be warned according to the rabbis. Even chaverim need warning. Everybody needs warning. You have to be warned before you do an action, and that's going to be the opinion of the rabbis by us. That's going to be the opinion of the chachamim by us. Of Rabbi Meir by us. The chachamim who say a chaver needs warning, therefore, in this case, she was an isha chavera and she wasn't warned at all. If she wasn't warned, well, you can't kill her because even chaverim need warning. But Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda is going to match the opinion of the rabbis. It's done in a court of 23, even if she wasn't warned. Why is that? Chaver, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Chaver ein sarich hatra'ah. Chaver doesn't need warning. Lefisha lo nitna hatra'ah ela lavchim ben shogeg lemezid, as I said before. What's the purpose of Hatra'ah? To understand, do you know what's wrong? Do you not know what's wrong? Are you doing it intentionally or not intentionally? If you're a chaver, we assume you know the halacha. So we assume you know that it's wrong and that you'll get the death penalty. So the only reason why we warn you is to make sure that you know it's wrong, because you're an Am Haaretz. You might not even know the law. But if you know the law, you don't even need to be warned. So therefore, if there's a Motzi Shemra case where she wasn't warned and there's witnesses and she wasn't warned, well, according to the rabbis, this could still get you to the death penalty, because if she's a chaverah, you don't even need warning. And according to Rabbi Meir, it'll never get to the death penalty because even chaverim need warning. This is machloket we're going to see later on in the Masechet as well. It's a very big basic machloket, because you're basically, I don't know what percentage of the population are chaverim, but let's say 50-50. You're going to basically end up saying the whole issue of hatra'ah is irrelevant for 50% of the population. And yes, I see you're asking, can a woman be a chavera? Obviously, a woman can be a chavera, because that's what they're saying here. They assume that the women knew these basic halachot as well. And, it gets tricky, because what halachot, where do you draw the line? But they assume women know these halachot also. Okay, so with that, we're going to end. What we did in the second part of today's class was go over this Motzi Shemra case, this machloket Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. So far, we saw 4 explanations. I'll just go through them quickly, and with that, we'll finish. Ula, Chosheshin Lelaz. Any case could turn into Dine Nefashot, and therefore, according to the rabbis, Rabbi Meir says, I'm not worried that Edom are going to come. So if you come without witnesses, the husband comes without witnesses, it's clearly a Dine Mamano case. We're just going to do it in front of 3. Rava says, no, we're talking about a unique case where it started with 23. He said he had witnesses. Turns out he didn't. And then it goes down to 3. But we can't go down to 3 because it's not respectful to the original judges. That's the rabbis. Rabbi Meir says, no, there's no such issue of not being respectful. It's a different case. Abaye creates a completely, totally different case, where one is, it started with the husband claiming, and then once the husband's witnesses were knocked out, it's going to be a different Dina Momino case, which is, right, oh, sorry, no, I got confused. That was the contradiction. That was how we resolved the contradiction, by bringing a different case. That was just a side about the Tosefta. I'm not going to go back to that. Abaye says we're talking about that there was a problem with the warning. She was warned, but not for which death penalty. And then it's a machloket tanaim, which matches the machloket tanaim between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. Can she be killed? According to the rabbis, yes. According to Rabbi Meir, no, because she wasn't warned which particular death. And according to Rav Papa, it's the chavera. Does she need a warning again, or does she not? If she doesn't need a warning, then she could be killed. If she does need a warning and she can't be killed, then it's definitely going to be, right, then it's 3, because it can never become a Dina Nefasho case. That's the end for today. We're going to continue this into tomorrow's daf. Wishing everyone a good day and a happy Hanukkah.